Good afternoon, everyone. Now, I'm of the generation who can remember when transatlantic communication was a wind-up Bakelite telephone where you had to ask the operator to connect you to the number. And at heart, you knew that you were inviting a third person to participate in the phone call in what I suppose is an early version of phone tapping. And now here we are. If my research is correct, I'm 7,083 kilometres in that direction. So this is a great day for PW. We know who you really are, and I'm delighted to be able to contribute. Our first contact was during COVID when, through the circumnavigations of X, Twitter till its own name, he came across a contribution I made to a COVID poetry reading project. He flattered me greatly. He sent me his books. I hope they're on sale on a table at the back, and he invited me to read one of his own poems, The Conversation. So I kept a tight eye on my online bank accounts for a few weeks before deciding he was for real, and then I was happy to oblige. And this has since clocked up a staggering 25,000 hits. So with one foot in Ireland and another in Canada, he straddles the Atlantic like a poetic Finn McCool, creating unsettling scenarios and complicated characters, many with a secret to hide. Perhaps after a career of having to censure those who broke the rules, he can now celebrate those very same characters. And here is one such. Lead us not into temptation. Poor Mr. Pin was endearingly simple. He clumped about in a shiny black built-up shoe. His room in Islington was small and always cold with only one window, rather like Mr. Bleeny's. Mr. Pin smiled often, spoke softly, and said little, wishing not to vex the others, especially Mrs. Doll, his imperious and astringent landlady. But careful though he was, she did find a bikini lying crumpled on his pillow. Well, of course she did. She found it there during her house cleaning. Mrs. Doll cleaned religiously every third Sunday, except while on holiday at Blackpool in September. She perfunctorily swept and dusted her boarders' rooms, always taking time to have a little look around. Mr. Pin was unfailingly at St. John's of a Sunday, singing and taking communion. Had he remembered, he wondered fearfully, that snowy Sunday morning in February? Had he remembered to fetch his pretty delicates up off the bed and return them to safety in his long dead mother's locking suitcase? Oh dear, oh my, he was becoming so forgetful. With the wintry weather, he left for church in an awful hurry. Well, he soon had his answer. It was writ plainly across Mrs. Doll's face. Taking him aside for a private word after rewarming his lunch of tea, boiled lamb and 2 veg, he'd stayed for a while after choir practice to discuss his treble parts with Mr. Snape, the new deacon. She told Mr. Pin in a hushed voice what she'd found, then added grimly, I'm minded to call in the police. Oh no, you mustn't, Mrs. Doll, he pleaded. His heart raced and even his good knee began to weaken. Please, just go to your room. I need time to think, said Mrs. Doll to Mr. Pin. She seemed very cross. Mr. Pin did just as he was told. Then he knelt at the side of his bed and prayed fervently, like a child, beseeching God for his forgiveness for all those times he had taken lacy things off the clotheslines. He knew that if the coppers got involved, there could be no thought of turning back. He'd be reviled. He'd never be able to show his face again at St. John's. Neither could he ever consider returning to work, repairing ladies' pumps and mules in the back of Selfridges. So, like a child, he prayed. When he finished, he reached up for long-dead Mr. Doll's Bible, the only book he found on the shelf when he first took the room earlier in 1955, and pulled it down, his guilt and worry thus far quite undiminished. Then, as if by providence, the Bible fell open to a verse in Deuteronomy. The one in which God gathers up the faithful outcasts from the desert and takes them to himself. Its place held by a cheap return ticket for travel from Shoreham by sea to Christ's Hospital in West Horsham via Staining. At the sight of it, Mr. Pin's racing pulse and twitching eyebrow began slowly to be stilled. Mr. Pin was a simple man, yes, but for him this was a powerful metaphor. No matter that Christ's Hospital was, he knew, was a school. For him, this railway ticket pointed the way. It furnished a reassuring reminder that staining of the soul caused by sins accrued along life's jostling passage can be treated and cleansed by regular journeys to Christ's Hospital. So A weight began to lift from his every limb, his shoulders, indeed from his very heart. Redemption is always possible. It had been said so many times in sermons at St. John's, yet it took seeing this ticket at a time of crisis to bring fully home the greatest truth, that all is never lost. Oh yes, thought Mr. Pym, his deep despair subsiding. Then came a soft knock at his door. There, wearing his bikini beneath her unbuttoned gingham house dress, stood a tremulous and expectant Mrs. Dahl.